Wow, the week is finally here. This is Hugh Freeze's week to show everybody else what he sees in Payton Thorne.
You are Locked On Auburn, your daily podcast on the Auburn Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On Auburn, your daily Auburn Tigers podcast. I'm your host, Zach Blackerby, and thank you so much for making Locked On Auburn your first listen every single day. We are live from SEC Media Days. Darrell, Dapprich, my partner in crime for the week. We will hear from Lindsay Crosby, Auburn baseball expert, later in the show to talk about Butch Thompson hitting a home run. But let's start things off, Darrell, with the biggest Auburn storyline is, okay, Payton Thorne, representing Auburn, one of the three guys coming here. He'll talk on Thursday. But to me, this is about Hugh Freeze looking at Payton Thorne and saying, yes, I'm riding with you. I didn't get another transfer portal quarterback. You're my guy. I want the rest of the conference to see what I have in you. That's what this is.
Yeah, I liken it to kind of a redemption tour that, Payton Thorne had some moments last year where he struggled. He was much maligned. The media, the other writers in the SEC, some of the other coaches in the SEC, people that cover other SEC teams really knocked Hugh Freeze for sticking with Payton Thorne at times and not going out, as you mentioned, and getting a quarterback in the portal. And I think this is a way for Hugh Freeze to kind of stick this back in their face and say, no, you're going to get an opportunity this week to see what I see in Payton Thorne. You're going to get a chance to talk to the young man, let him exude his confidence. And Hugh Freeze bringing Payton Thorne here is a strong message to the rest of the conference that I'm here to showcase him and let you see what I see in him.
Yeah, and there's going to be a ton of quarterbacks here this week, and we're going to hear from all of them. But Payton is the one that's probably the most judged, the most scrutinized is great, criticized. Like, I was going to say like overanalyzed, but actually I think it's the other way around. I think they're just throwing stuff without actually looking at the context of why his stats were what they were a year ago. But so all of these guys are proven starters in the conference, including Payton Thorne, that are coming this week. But the view on Thorne is different than the other guys. And I'm excited, eager, curious to see what that actually looks like on the podium.
I think there'd be a different take, Zach, if Payton Thorne was a guy that was recruited by Auburn, redshirted as a freshman, was always in the conference. And I'm not saying that a lot of these takes are lazy, but I'm saying that they're not doing due diligence because he played in the Big Ten for a couple years. I think if you did your research and really did a deep dive and saw the years that Payton Thorne had at Michigan State when he had another Coleman that he was throwing to, and he had a good running back room, look what he did. And I think that's what the hope is, and that's what Hugh Freeze believes. Doesn't hope, believes that this is what's going to happen because of more weapons. There's a track record there. And a lot of the people that have lazy takes about Payton Thorne don't understand the history behind some of the previous successful seasons he had. And I think this is where it starts. This is like I mentioned before, this is step one in the redemption tour for Payton Thorne.
Now, obviously, and there's several people that have watched this far and have rolled their eyes like, oh, who cares? Who cares what he says on Thursday? And you're right. I mean, ultimately, the thing that matters is, can he be better on the field? And so no matter what he says later this week, it's nice. But here's what I want to see. We all know that Payton Thorne can win the interview, and he needs to do it on Thursday. But the way I think he does it, Darrell, what I want to see some edginess. I want to see him be a little bit aggressive. He knows that all of these people here that are voting for, first, second, and third team, all SEC preseason teams and, the preseason poll and all of that stuff, they're all counting him out. The vast majority of folks are counting him out. And these are the same people that are going to be asking him questions. And I want him to be a little edgy on the way back, kind of stand up for himself, say, hey, this is how bad it was a year ago. I didn't have an offensive coordinator that knew any sort of game plan whatsoever. We come out of timeouts and still have delay of games because we couldn't get a call in. He's like, I could only do so much but we fixed it all. Derek Nix has come in to be the new OC, and he's been great. Hugh Freeze is calling plays. It's great. They got me a super stud Cam Coleman to come in, and Robert Lewis and Keandre Lambert-Smith is here. They've got me these toys to throw to. I want to see that. I want to say, yes, it wasn't good last year, but that wasn't all me, and we fixed it. That's what I want to see. I want to see him come out swinging a little bit.
There's a fine line with that, though. It's going to have to be a balancing act. And,
sure.
And where you can get caught up in some problems is alienating teammates. I understand the Philip Montgomery argument, and I would lean heavily on that if I was Payton Thorne, with play calling and not knowing, what was going on with inconsistency. You have to be careful with the weapons angle, meaning, hey, I've got Cam Coleman and Robert Lewis for the receivers that are still there. The Caleb Burtons, the Cam Browns, Fairweather as a tight end. You have to be careful not to alienate them with bragging about and raving about the new additions.
Do you think they thought they were good enough a year ago?
No, but you're going into this year where you don't want any fractured locker rooms. You don't want people to say, well, our quarterback, who's supposed to be our leader, just basically threw us under the bus and said we weren't good enough last year, so we had to bring in new talent. I'm not saying that that's not true.
Sure.
I'm just saying you have to be adept at how you articulate that. And probably Hugh Freeze and them have done a little media training with him to make sure he doesn't alienate, isolate. There's a way to talk about how excited you are with the new core coming in without acting like the old one was, crappy. I mean, we know that there needed to be room for improvement, but I think that's the first point. And then the second point is he has read all the preseason publications that have him 9th, 10th, 11th, some even 14th, 15th best in the conference.
I saw one earlier this week. I literally had him last.
So that should be something when you talk about edginess that he should come in with a chip on his shoulder about.
Yeah, I want to see him not outwardly upset, but I do want to see a little bit of I'm ticked off and I can't wait to prove all of you losers wrong. That's what I want to see, but you've got to be careful because you don't want to come across as cocky or anything like that. And I trust him to handle that the right way, but that's on him. That's on him. And we'll see if that happens Thursday. That's the thing I'm most excited to see if it does or does not happen on Thursday. One thing you said about, a fractured locker room, you don't want that, which of course you don't. The main reason I'm not concerned about that, and I think you've heard this too, is the groups, the group of receivers, the personalities in that wide receiver room. It seems like they are extremely close. And if the closeness that I'm picking up on is legitimate, they've had some conversations. They understand that there's got to be self-awareness there. So because of the level of closeness that I'm hearing is happening in this wide receiver room, I think Payton can mention certain names.
Well, I think that, something that's also a little bit of a sneak peek is what Keandre Lambert-Smith said earlier this week on a podcast about what he was most excited about in this upcoming Auburn season. He mentioned Payton Thorne. Now, there's a guy that's played in the Big Ten, has had some good years. So I think that's something that when you talk about the closeness of the wide receiver room, maybe they have his back. Maybe they feel like, hey, let's just block out all the noise. This is our dude. And I want to go back to something else, too, that you mentioned about the cockiness and the edginess.
Sure.
It brought me back to 2019 when, and again, I'm not making the comparison on the field. I'm making an analogy about a storyline. Joe Burrow had a decent 2018, but it was not great. It was kind of mediocre. He came in 2019 SEC Media Days and put everybody on blast and everybody on notice with the weapons that he got and how they were going to look different with a new offensive coordinator with Joe Brady, and things were going to change. Maybe Payton Thorne can just show a sliver of that optimism and that hope and that same little swag and say, I'm different than I was last year. We got a new OC. We got more weapons. Just wait and see. I remember all of us walking out of SEC Media Days and going, what is Joe Burrow smoking? I mean, that's too cocky. And then he ended up backing it up. Again,
he was smoking a cigar after the national championship.
I'm not saying the two are the same core. I'm talking about just mindset. And that would be something that I would like to see.
Oh, that's the best case scenario. Yeah. From your mouth to God's ears.
There you go,
my friend. All right. Commissioner Sankey will be the main headliner today, the first day of SEC Media Days. What does that mean for Auburn? What does that mean for the conference? Coming up right here on Locked On Auburn. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at eBay Motors. Darrell, just quick question. Can you imagine buying parts for your car, truck, SUV anywhere other than eBay Motors?
I cannot, and I can say that confidently because I've done it both on a personal level and a company level.
Oh, yeah.
With a fleet. Just think about this. Zach, you're ready for a big road trip coming to Dallas, driving out here. You got to make sure your car is in tip-top shape, and if you needed that extra part, eBay Motors is a place to go.
Yeah, there's no question about it because, look, they've got over 122 million parts for anything you need. Make, model, whatever it is. So they've got you covered. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay guaranteed fit. Only available to U.S. customers. Darrell, when Commissioner Sankey takes the stand later today, and by the time some of you guys are watching this, he already has, it's going to be a lot about Oklahoma and Texas. More so Texas. We're in Dallas. I'm kind of expecting it to be the Texas show all week. I think that's okay, because I think there's so many different things going on in all of these, these 16 different schools. We talk about Payton Thorne, handling the media the right way, but really the best case scenario is Auburn just kind of slides in and they slide out while everybody's still focused on Texas and Oklahoma. And I think that's what Sankey's going to make it all about. Yeah,
being under the radar at SEC Media Days sometimes is not a bad thing. This is Commissioner Sankey's day to shine today. And
he's waited a long time.
It was announced at a 2021 SEC Media Days about Texas and Oklahoma.
It was still in Hoover. That's back when it was still in Hoover.
Still in Hoover. So the buzz, was around then. He has waited for this moment, his moment to shine, because he is now the king of the best. Well, it was the best conference anyway, but you've just gotten stronger with the addition of Texas and Oklahoma.
Right.
With that, though, is storylines. I've talked to you about this before. Is there going to be a faction of this media that comes at Hugh Freeze and says, hey, what happened down the stretch? You lost your last 3 games. What happened with 4th and 31? You couldn't get a stop. What about your coach turnover, your new offensive coordinator, new defense? All those questions have the tendency to be a little bit not put in a positive light. May not happen. Mm-hmm. Because Auburn may go under the radar with the Texas and Oklahoma glare that we're all going to be feeling the whole week.
Mm-hmm. I think Auburn's in its prime spot. It's at the end of the week. A lot of people have already been gone. To me, Hugh Freeze is going to come in. I think he's going to be very boring, which is what he needs to be. I think he's going to be honest, but I think there's not going to be a whole lot of flash with Auburn. And ultimately, that's the true goal here. So we'll see. From the Auburn perspective, I'm almost a little frustrated that Oklahoma isn't getting more of this buzz. And I'm kind of wondering if it's all going to be on Texas and not Oklahoma, because you kind of want Oklahoma feeling really good about themselves for them to come into Jordan-Hare Stadium. In week 5, you kind of want them to have that false sense of security. But that's so far into the season, it's probably not going to matter. But I'm just kind of thinking from the Auburn perspective about these two teams. Auburn plays Oklahoma, not Texas.
But Oklahoma's been a little bit more, kind of not as much buzz, under the radar. Texas has been the one that's kind of been bravado and had his chest out a little bit, and their fan base. Oklahoma, not so much. They've been a little more quiet, a little less flashy about that. Mm-hmm. So I've heard a lot more about the Longhorn thing because they were in the college football playoff last year. Right. So, there's a buzz with that. And Sark is a little different than Brent Venables. That will be an interesting storyline, too, to watch the 2 new coaches and how they handle SEC Media Days. And then the new coaches, the ones that are first-year coaches in the league as well, Levy and Elko. I just think there's a lot of different storylines that you mentioned may keep Hugh Freeze under the radar, which is a good thing right now.
Elko, I think, goes last on Thursday. Is there going to be anybody in that room for him?
That's tough when you go last on the last day.
I know they're in Dallas, and so they're probably going to get some extra folks, but just goodness, there's very little buzz. You talk about all the newness of the SEC, the newness that is Mike Elko. I just haven't really seen a whole lot of excitement about it.
No, I haven't. He's a solid coach, and I know what he did at Duke. It's not easy to do at Duke, but there's really not that flash. And that I think another storyline, too, with Sankey, the 12-team playoff. Everybody feels like the 12-team playoff is so suited for the SEC because the SEC could get 4 teams.
They should.
And so with that, again, he becomes the king of the castle. I mean, if his conference gets 4 or 5 teams in and he's got 16 teams in this conference and it's so elite, the storyline again becomes his leadership and how he navigated all this. And I think we'll see that right out of the gate today.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure he'll be asked about taking on more teams. And I think it's to Auburn's benefit that they don't expand anymore. I think you want to stay put at 16. He's been pretty consistent over the last several years, or since the Oklahoma and Texas news has come out, that they're good. They want to stay at 16. I can't imagine that'll change. I'm sure he's going to be asked about scheduling. And it's like, okay, is Auburn going to just play Alabama every year? They're going to play Alabama and Georgia every year. There's a chance we get an answer on that today, but I doubt it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it came up last year and he ducked that question about, common opponents and rotating opponents and that kind of thing. And then
he bought another year.
Bought another year.
You're playing the same schedule, just flip locations. Okay. But at some point, like you've got to establish the new policy. You've got to figure that out.
You do. He parlayed that into a made-for-TV event, which I kind of liked how they released the schedule. So,
yes.
It takes something like that and utilize it, and that's where he is a master at that. And so that's why I think, however that question comes up, asking him about the schedule and the common opponents and the fixed opponents and that kind of thing, he's not going to give too much away,
right?
Because it's such a made-for-TV event later in the year.
Yeah. No question about it. No question about it. All right. You can follow along with Darrell's stuff all week. He's going to be writing stuff at auburndaily.com as well. But we're going to pivot away from football to baseball just for a second, because Auburn baseball, they hit it out of the park this weekend. Lindsay Crosby joins me next. Auburn Daily's Lindsay Crosby hanging out with us. Lindsay, Auburn landing Cade Fisher, the former Florida pitcher. How much does this change what Auburn can do this upcoming season with baseball?
This is the big piece you were waiting on. And I do think this could significantly raise the ceiling for Auburn baseball in 24. So here's the thing. The guys that you took out of the portal, right? You got Mason Koch out of Creighton. You got Samuel Dutton out of LSU. You got Ryan Hetzel out of Cal Baptist. Promising pitchers. You've got some good freshmen in this class that are coming in. You've got Cam Tilley coming back. But you were missing that guy who could be your stud, your ace. The guy that he's going to get the ball on a Friday night. He's going to be able to rack up double-digit strikeouts and just keep the opposing team off the board. You were missing the stuff, right? You just didn't have a guy who had experience in college and had the stuff, and this was the big fish they were targeting. So Cade Fisher, we talked about this last week on the bonus show on Monday. Another guy that really good 2023, struggled a bit last season, and Auburn swooped in, got him. Unlike some of those other guys, he was very highly desired. He visited Mississippi State, Chris Lemonis. He visited Tennessee. Auburn held off a late push from Tennessee to bring him in. And former freshman All-American, made the All-SEC freshman team in 2020 year. Cade Fisher has the potential on the mound to be one of the more impactful transfers Auburn has brought in as far as pitching staff is concerned in the Butch Thompson era.
Is there any chance he's not the ace for next year's staff, Lindsay?
If he's not the ace, it's because Auburn gets amazing production out of Cam Tilley. I mentioned him a minute ago. True freshman last year. His splitter was probably the single best pitch on campus. Now, tough year for everybody on Auburn staff. He didn't quite have the results you wanted, but he was also thrust into a larger role than you expected him to have in his freshman year because of the issues you have with Joseph Gonzalez, the issues you have with Chase Alsop. So if Cade Fisher is not the guy, it's because Cam Tilley jumps him and passes him with an offseason of work. But either way, I predict those two guys, nobody's a lock for the rotation, right? Too much is going to happen between now and next spring. But on paper, those are my two favorites in the clubhouse to be starters on opening day of the 2025 season.
Sure. So what do you think it was about Auburn's pitch, pun intended, to get him here? You mentioned, I mean, let's just be frank, several programs that are better at baseball than Auburn was over the last year or so. I mean, obviously Tennessee, they're coming off of a national championship, and then Mississippi State, it seems like they're there every few years. What do you think it was about Auburn's pitch? Did they kind of rally maybe more NIL, make a bigger NIL push for him? Or do you think you wanted to play at Auburn for a specific reason?
So as I understand, Tennessee's final offer in NIL was more than Auburn's. I don't have enough confidence in the exact amounts I was told to kind of, report those. But from what I understand, Tennessee offered more money than Auburn did. But it came down to a couple factors. One, the idea of what Auburn is trying to do here, bringing in a former professional pitching development coach. Despite what the results you got from the pitching staff last year, there's a lot of belief in the industry that is the right path, and Auburn's embrace of analytics, embrace of biomechanics, things like that's going to pay off and get guys into the league, as well as the opportunity at Auburn, right? I mean, there is nobody right now who is locked into a starting spot in the rotation at Auburn. And Fisher's a guy that he started 2 games his freshman year. He got into the rotation for 9 games in his sophomore year, but they moved him back to the bullpen because of some control issues. And so the opportunity from the outside, it feels like you have a pretty good chance at getting a rotation spot at Auburn compared to some of these other schools. But another big part is Derek Fabian, transferred in from Florida to Auburn prior to last season. Apparently, they are very, very close friends. And so within the first hour of Fisher officially being in the portal, Fabian had already reached out, answered all of the questions he had, didn't do a hard sell, but just answered his questions, got him in touch with the right people. He came to visit, really loved it on campus, and chose us over some other schools.
It's a huge win. It's an absolutely colossal win. Also, another big win, Cooper McMurray saying, hey, I'm staying at Auburn. I'm not going to try my chances in the draft right now. Yeah, and this is big for Auburn. 2 straight years of an OPS over 1,000. I mean, that is pretty good. Really good defense at first base. Obviously, he's entering his senior year now, so this is probably going to be the last ride here. But the big thing for Cooper McMurray is you didn't really have any sort of ready-to-go replacements at first base, right? You've had Gavin Miller's a guy that had come in as a third baseman, just finished his second year of the program, backed up third base and first base. He transferred out, right? He left and went somewhere else. And so you didn't have a slam dunk take over first base kind of guy. Now you have Cooper McMurray. You can pair him with Ike Irish. You have these 2 now veterans, upperclassmen in the heart of your order. And this gives McMurray a chance to establish himself as a more desired draft prospect. He had a little bit of injury issues. He played 43 games in 23, played 52 games last year, finished both seasons with 14 home runs. And at a position like first base, when you're not going to be stealing bases, and even though Cooper's a good defender, not a lot of teams really care about first base defense. Mm-hmm. You really need to have a 20, 25 homer season to put yourself on the map to be a day 2 pick versus one of those day 3 kind of, bonus picks. If he signs, great. If not, we don't really care. Yeah. The model I'm thinking about here, Sonny DeShera, going into Sonny DeShera's final year at Auburn, coming off a good year at Samford, really, just crushed in the SEC, was a 5th round pick of the Angels. That's kind of what you're looking at for Cooper McMurray. I think he could go higher because he can offer a little bit more defensive value than Sonny did. But big retention for Auburn on a guy that was draft eligible, could have gone to the draft, chose to stay, and now you have a offensive core to build around of those 2 guys and Cade Bellew, the outfielder. Lindsay, how can people check out everything you've got going on?
I'm on Twitter at Crosby Baseball. We're going to be covering the MLB draft, both from the professional perspective on BravesToday.com, as well as Auburn's guys. You've got 2 top 50 prospects in Christian Chatterton and Connor Gatwood, 2 righties from Alabama who could potentially be taken. We'll have all of that coverage at auburndaily.com.
Yeah, and we'll have coverage of SEC Media Days all week, both here at Locked on Auburn and at auburndaily.com. Please like the video. Please subscribe. We'll see you tomorrow. This has been Locked on Auburn.